Okay, so welcome everybody to our fourth webinar of the ISMA Accredited Farm Well Hub Stress Management Series. I'm Anne-Marie Doran and I'm delighted to be your host today. So throughout the series, we've explored how stress shows up in farming life, how to manage it, and how small daily actions can strengthen both well-being and resilience. Today, we're going to round off the series by focusing on flourishing and the 5 ways to well-being, how we can move from simply coping to truly thriving in work and in life. So joining me are two excellent guests, a regular, Finola Colgan, one of Ireland's leading mental health consultants and lifelong experience of farming life, and Dr. Diana van Doorn from Teagasc, whose works explores how farmer health and well-being connect directly to safety on the farm. This webinar, along with the full series, is proudly supported and funded by the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to Finola. Finola, you're very welcome back, and I'm going to let you take us maybe through the recap of the last three series and then on to our new topic today.
Lovely. Okay, thank you so much for that nice introduction, Anne-Marie. Again, absolutely delighted to be part of the process, and particularly delighted Diana can join us this morning because we worked together in the past, and I know Diane has a lot to offer us in this final webinar. I suppose in some ways we've moved on from the ISMA format and bringing our own kind of measured interest interest in the topic. And so, like as we discussed, we thought it might be interesting to look at, just remind people or to somebody just listening in for the first time, what we have covered over the last three sessions. And the first area we looked at was the whole area of understanding stress, recognizing the signs and I suppose our responses to stress and stress can mean different things to different people. And I suppose the thing we also must understand about stress is there's as many books written about stress as there are causes of stress. And the important thing is to recognize, and our key message was, recognize when you are under stress and not to ignore it and to do something about it. And this is particularly important, and I expect Diane will comment on it from the SafeHabitus point of view, that when we are under stress, accidents can happen, or we might make a poor decision, or we just might lose our cool, as they say. And we also looked at the different types of personalities. And, there's class A and class B, but what we also discovered, the person with an A type personality is all the time on the go, achieving, whereas the person with B personality traits tends to be a little bit more measured in that. But we also came to the conclusion in our discussion that there's a bit of A and B in most of us. And we also looked at, how do we handle our challenges? How do we explored mental health. We looked at the wheel of life, which is really important. And, every day will throw up different challenges. Some of them will be quite positive, manageable. Some of them will be, we might need support. So we'd encourage you to go back onto that session if you haven't already listened into it, and review what was there, because again, we have so many resources up there tagged in with all of these sessions so that you can do your own self-assessment and be guided by that. And just, it's your document, it's your personal responses, and just gives you a fair good idea where you are. And all the better if things are going well. And it's when we're going well, that's when we need to kind of say, when things aren't going so well, actually, what has worked well for me in the past. And I'm going to hand back to you, Anne-Marie, because you're the specialist in the whole area of nutrition and health, and you did a fantastic session, I know, and I learned a lot from it as well. And so I'd love to get your key pointers on that again.
Thanks, Finola. In the third session, we talked about the SHED method, which were four key pillars to our well-being. So SHED standing for sleep, hydration, exercise, and diet. And it's a nice concept to keep it very simple and to make some small little changes. If you haven't seen that webinar, there is a much more concise explanation and kind of tips and tricks to follow some of the guidelines in terms of improving on your sleep, your hydration, your exercise, and your diet. Now, there are four pillars of health. There are many, many more, of course. Um, I suppose I'm a nutritionist by trade, and you would think that I would say your diet is 100% the most important thing. I believe that there is no substitute for a good night's sleep. It's really vital in terms of your decision making, your mood, and your physical health. Obviously, all the other things feed in as well. But even looking back, and we spoke about sleep hygiene and how you can improve your sleep um, through kind of not having screen time and phones before bedtime and winding down, etc. We spoke about hydration and how even being a tiny bit dehydrated can lead to poor energy levels and loss in concentration, which leads to, the day becoming a lot harder than it would be if we were fully hydrated. We spoke about exercise and how farming is, a very physically demanding job. However, exercise brings many other benefits than physical well-being. It also allows you to connect with other people, and doing something for yourself is also really important that you enjoy outside of the working environment. As much as I love my work, I also love to get away from the desk and do other things as well. And really, it's very similar for people in physically demanding jobs. And then, of course, diet and nutrition. It's a minefield, it's a huge subject, and we can really, really overcomplicate nutrition. I think, especially, there's a lot of noise in online and in the media, particularly just around well-being in general. But I think we can just make small changes that can really help us. With diet, my overarching kind of feeling on it and tip would be just make sure you're getting lots of variety in diet. If you look back on your week and you say, did I eat all the colours of the rainbow? Am I getting all the different varieties into my diet? Then what you're doing is you're influxing your body in lots of vitamins and minerals, which in turn leads to overall health. That is a very short summary of those pillars of health. But if you are interested in hearing more, you can look back on the last webinar. Um,
Yeah. No, thanks for that, Anne-Marie. And like, there's such important points. And I know you mentioned one small change. I made a few small changes. One, from the very first webinar series, I realized I was never eating a proper breakfast
mm,
and kind of settling for a cup of coffee and maybe a glass of water and out the door. And I realized the importance of having a cereal. And now my day feels empty if I don't have that cereal and a boiled egg. And you're set up like you don't even feel like wanting to eat again at 11 o'clock or whatever, other than maybe have it. And then the
yeah.
other one was like learning about the importance of drinking water. We take it so much for granted, don't we?
Mm,
And I trekked around on a trip with my daughter and during the summer, and oh, she was all the time giving like, you're not drinking enough water, mommy, and whatever. And like I might have half a bottle of a 500. It's not sufficient. So no, the water is so, so important. So thanks very much for that. And I know Diane is going to come back in on the conversation.
yeah.
But part of what we've talked about, can can, I suppose, impact on us in terms of, are we flourishing, are we languishing? And the Professor Corey Keyes some years ago looked at that whole area of a person's overall health, and in particular their mental health. And he carried out a survey, a psychological assessment, on 1,000 people between the ages of 17 and 84, like a complete, I don't know, proper professional psychological assessment. And when he had all done and evaluated, 14% of those people were actually what he called flourishing. 54% had good to moderate mental health. 20%, which is interesting, actually had a diagnosis of mental illness. So when he talked about mental illness in that diagnosis, anything that, such as eating disorders, postnatal depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, schizophrenia, enduring depression, and I suppose this is sometimes we get mixed up between mental health and mental illness. We have a much clearer understanding of physical health. feeling well, we can kind of identify with it. But there's as many diagnoses of physical illnesses, and perhaps even more than with mental illness problems and difficulties. But the last 9%, which is always of interest to people and employers and workplaces, are 9% were languishing. And what did you say about that? Basically, a person is languishing. They're they're stuck in a rut. Well, that's one way of putting it in an Irish sense. But they've neither got good mental health or they haven't got a mental illness, but they're kind of between the zone. And and I was with a particular organization some years ago, and they were looking at this, and there was 297 employees, and he said, that means like 9 to 10% of my employees are languishing. And that could very well be the case. And because people will languish, they're present, but presenteeism, they talk about it, that can be very same in farming. You're kind of getting out of bed, struggling through the day, and just getting through it, or worst case scenario, not even getting out of bed. But the good news about all of that is that when he went back and he revisited his survey and the people he had assessed, that people that were flourishing at that point in time had moved across the scale, or perhaps now languishing, and those that were languishing had moved across to flourishing. And that's what we must understand in life, little bit like the image there. There will be days where we're kind of dragging ourselves, pulling ourselves forward. Maybe we're just have to fill in forms, or we've gotten difficulties with the communication. Like so many little triggers in our day can impact on us and can slow us down. And then somebody comes along and says, "You've done a great job there, John," or that's work well done. You begin to thrive and you begin to flourish and you begin to believe in yourself. So what we'd like you to understand from that, and we have more information on our resources with this webinar series, that just recognize there will be days that we will languish, but more often than not, we're flourishing and we're thriving. And if we are languishing and it's dragging on, then that is a warning sign. Things mightn't be in the best place for us. And it's important, maybe, again, our message all the time and Farmwell Hub is to go out there and seek support and seek help. And sometimes it might be just a cup of tea can make all the difference. But personally, I like that whole idea of flourishing and languishing because it can help us to understand where you're at. And you have to allow yourself maybe from time to time to languish and just get your thoughts together. Would you like to comment on that before we move on to how can we best support ourselves when we're in that position? Any thoughts on that, Diane? Yeah.
Yes, well, I think this was a very comprehensive introduction as well with all the lifestyle, looking at the different components which makes up health and lifestyle. What I was picking up on when you were talking, a very interesting talk about the 9% languishing is as well, and I will focus on that a little bit later, as in who are these people? So, there's broader impacts, which we call the determinants of health, which are social, economic, and occupational factors, which impact if you're flourishing or your ability or maybe your chances to flourish and languish. But what you were saying, like in general, the resilience and healthy lifestyle is a huge, and connection as well is a huge difference between flourishing and languishing.
Yeah, that's good. Anne-Marie, I know we've talked about this over the last 3 webinars as well.
Yeah, no, really interesting. It's a very good analysis of it. I think it's very much easier to understand when you break it down into. I know
Yeah,
it's black and white, but yeah, I think it
yeah,
definitely will resonates with me. I have those days as well. So
yeah,
yeah, it's an
yeah.
interesting way of
And
looking
it's
at it.
interesting.
Yeah.
And it's interesting the way. Sorry, I've cut across you there, but it's interesting the way you say black and white. And sometimes life can feel like that, but if we can move over, we can find ourselves in a better space, really. What we're encouraging you to understand is, like, there will be days something, everything is going great. And then there's days, like I think an Irish understanding of it is stuck in the rut, and it can be a warning sign and to prevent that. So our kind of focus on what can help, and it's kind of one of the key messages of the Farm Well Hub, is the 5 ways to well-being. So let me introduce you to them, and then we will pick up on our conversation. So the 5 ways to well-being, it's a plan to protect your mental health. Connect, be active, take notice, keep learning, and give. So what do they look like? Connect, the importance of connecting. And I kept the concept of connecting right throughout the 5 ways to well-being, because when we connect with ourselves, how we're coping, how we're feeling, but also to connect with our communities, connect when things are going well, connect when things aren't going so well. But as I say, we have all these divvied up in our resources on this one. So connect, be active off farm. So I remember some time ago saying to my son about, I live in a farm, as you probably picked up, and he said, Mammy, like, why would you be talking about farmers being active? But the reality is, and I know Anne-Marie will be good at this as well, when being active on a farm and being active off the farm in terms of your own exercise, health, and that is quite something different, because, and we have the 5K couch challenge on the Farm Well Hub. Like, that's something different, and you're gaining momentum from that personally in terms of your physical and mental health. So consider, what can I do off farm? And when you're working off farm and involved in activities, not alone are you is it good for your own health, but you're also communicating as well with people. And then take notice. Do we take time to take notice as farmers, the land around us? I know you might say, oh, gosh, I haven't got time. I have to gather up the sheep. I have to see a cow calving or whatever. But sometimes it's worthwhile just slowing down like that gentleman and just look across and see nature. And, sometimes when it's in our doorstep, we miss it. I love living on a farm for very many different reasons, but because I didn't grow up on a farm, but I just love the scenery around it. And then, keep learning. Hopefully our webinar series has been useful for you in terms of learning. It's important. Sometimes they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but that's not at all true. That's a fallacy. Kind of like, of course you can keep learning and keep your brain active. And it doesn't always have to be, as we say, book learning, but clearly the way farming is developing, it's important to kind of keep yourself up to date as well about perhaps new techniques and that. And the next generation can keep the current generation motivated because they're out there engaging and learning and that, and they can bring back ideas. Sometimes there might be a meeting of the crossroads on new ideas, but it's always about communication. And last but not least, give. And we know farmers are absolutely amazing in their own communities, tractor runs and fundraising events, and they get out there and they support neighbours during bereavement times, when the wake is happening and guiding traffic. And that is amazing, and it's wonderful, and it's not something you might see in towns, and I mean busy towns and urban towns, but it's definitely a massive feature in the country. And farmers do give, and farm families give. But our message here again in Farm Well Hub is it's very important to give yourself and give to yourself. It's not selfish. You need time out. And this is part of the message we've consistently promoted throughout the webinar series, to look after yourself, because when you look after yourself, so much more falls into place. And we will argue, and not so much argue, we will promote the idea, give yourself these 5 ways to well-being. Connect, be active, take notice, keep learning, and give. And if at the end of the day, like you've had a busy day, and as Anne-Marie said, the importance of sleep, sometimes you might be just hitting the bed at 1 o'clock in the morning. But just be able to say, you know what, today I connected, today I was busy, today I took notice, today I learned something new. And you'll feel much better about yourself, because sometimes it's the negative that slows us down. And it's always much more important to focus on the positive. And just by way of reminder, to encourage you to visit the farmwellhub.ie for information and free resources, and to download, and of course to be able to share this session and these sessions with anybody that you think may benefit from it. So, so we can pick up from there, Anne-Marie.
Brilliant.
I'll just stop share there.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Finola, thanks a million.
yeah.
Really brilliant summary of the last three webinars there, and then the introduction to the 5 ways to wellbeing. We'll have, as you mentioned, we'll have all those resources on the website as well in terms of, how to maybe get some advice and tips around implementing some of those 5 ways to wellbeing as well. We've plenty of resources. So thanks a million for that, for giving that insight, Finola. And we are absolutely delighted to have Diana on the call with us here today. Um, Diana works for the farmers, works for farmers and research partners to better understand how physical and mental health influence safety and well-being on the farm. She's part of the SafeHabitus project, which brings together farmers, advisors, and policymakers across Ireland and Europe to create safer, healthier farming systems. She also contributed to the Farmers Have Hearts programme, helping design health and lifestyle supports delivered directly to farmers and farm workers. So, Diana, I am going to hand over the microphone to you, and we're absolutely delighted to have you, and it's such a pleasure. So I'm going to hand the microphone over to you, and I can ask you a couple of questions, just from our conversations beforehand. But you're very, very welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Very exciting. And thanks, Finola, for an excellent presentation.
Brilliant. Okay, so we'll get stuck into it, Diana. Could you tell us some of the most common health concerns you are seeing amongst farmers from the work that you're doing?
Yes, I know Finola ended with, looking at it from a positive perspective, but when we're looking at health of farmers, there are some concerning research outcomes. From my own research into cardiovascular health, we found that 74% of farmers have 4 or more risk factors for heart disease, which place them at a 3 times higher risk for an acute cardiac event. There's several Irish research which showed that 86% of farmers are overweight or obese. 56% of farmers have lower back pain. 60% suffers from respiratory diseases. And then farmers have 3 times higher self-reported arthritis, osteoarthritis, or rheumatoid arthritis compared to the national average. 4 times higher risk for skin cancers. And then, in the topic of this webinars and high level of occupational stress. Now, I want to stress, and I want to say that you probably spoke about this as well. There's a difference between stress, what everybody feels at work. You have your everyday stresses and you can cope with it. In farming, you can even visual that stress is needed to go over that harvest, to give that last push to bring everything in to complete it. So we're talking for stress when it becomes a health problem, when it is persistent stress. So if you keep on feeling stress and your heart rate goes up constantly, it affects your blood pressure. And then there's a lot of occupational health issues like hearing loss, skin problems, infections, and zoonosis. And there's little research on the prevalence among farmers on that. So there's more research needed on that. So quite a concerning picture in relation to the health issues for farmers.
Yes, Diana, and thanks for putting that into context. Yeah, and to have that real picture, I suppose, is a really important foundation in terms of where we go next and how we do move forward as a community. So in relation to the work, I know you've done a huge amount of work around this. How are physical and mental health connected to safety on the farm?
Yes, it is first of all very important to understand that we're talking often about our health or mental health or safety, like in silos, and they are not in silos. They are
Yeah.
constant connection with each other. You can imagine if you have health issues, that is like, you're not feeling well, you're fatigued, you're not sleeping well. That has an impact on how you
Yeah.
feel, on your stress levels,
Mhm.
on how you feel in yourself. And that has, Finola also mentioned it in her presentation, might be impacting your reaction quickness, your fastness, and
Yeah.
hazard safety illness. The same is for if you feel persistent stress or you're feeling down in yourself, that has actually an impact on your health. Like I said previously, that impacts your blood pressure, it impacts your heart rate, and that has then an impact on your immune system. You sleep less, and that again has then an impact on your physical health, and
Mm.
that has an impact on your farm safety, your ability to work on the farm. So it's very important to, place a holistic
Mm.
approach or address all these issues in a holistic way and treat them like with mental health, physical health is there as well, and farm safety. And if you're talking about physical health, you definitely need to incorporate mental health as well and support and safety. And what I said about the health issues among farmers, which is a concerning picture, the majority of these illnesses are preventable. So it is, although the
Mm.
figures are stark, we need to keep in mind that for the majority of farmers, if they take some changes in their lifestyle,
Yeah.
their physical health and their mental health will improve, and that will positively impact their safety. For example, if I talk about heart disease, because my research is in heart disease, 80% of heart disease is preventable. So that's a large number of cases which
Yeah.
can be prevented by making changes to your lifestyle.
Mm. Very interesting. I'm taking from this, Diana, that it requires that joined up thinking, and I do think we're coming to that place. And I know the Department of Agriculture are putting a lot of resource into bringing these programs together, and I suppose it essentially is what we're trying to achieve on the Farmwell Hub platform, where we bring everything to one place and have everything accessible in one area. But yeah, that's really interesting, and I do 100% agree that that joined up thinking is so important to put the jigsaw together to have the complete kind
Yes,
of result
it
in the end.
It is, and for policymakers, it's difficult because it is
Mm.
really difficult to say what's the chicken, what's the egg, what's the causal
Yeah,
relationship between them.
yeah.
So what was first? Was it the stress? Do we need to focus
Mm.
on that? Or was it the health? Do we need to focus on that? So it is for policymakers, they always need the evidence. So we need to do more research in this.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is important that whenever there's a health program set up, that there is attention for the mental well-being support and the other way around. And it is great to have initiatives like Farmwell Hub, where it brings together, because there's a lot of good initiatives around.
Yeah.
But this whole it's all fragmented, so the whole bringing it together is an important, and that we can work with each other and strengthen each other, rather than working inside those.
Yeah, yeah, that interagency approach is really important, I think,
Yes.
as we move forward. Um, so in terms of coming up with solutions and implementing changes, etc., I think traditionally farmers have been labeled, maybe wrongly, as hard to reach group when it comes to their health and their and accessing services. Why do you think this is, Diana?
Yes, we hear that a lot, that farmers are hard to reach and farmers are stuck in their ways. That's another thing. And I have to say, there's quite a bit of research out there which would say that farmers tend to not engage in health services. And,
Mm.
if you're looking at what hard to reach means, it is often focused on minority groups, like lower educated groups, lower socio-economic groups, occupational factors. Farming is often, in isolation, unpredictable. Then we have the rural living, so the distance to health services and the
Mm.
accessibility of health services in rural areas. And also a bit culture, farmers are approached as being maybe a bit more traditional masculine, stoic and self-reliant. And I have to say there's a lot of evidence, especially in Ireland, from projects like Farmers Have Hearts, the IFA is doing health checks, there's Farmers Fit. There's a lot of good projects who actually contradict this, as they are not hard to reach. If you reach them where they are, if you are having a more cultural competent, as we call it, services, so mean that you understand what are busy farming periods. So that is an harder, it's harder to reach them if you know on the predictability. So you offer flexible services for farmers. You work maybe out of hours. You go to them, so you have outreach services. And when you apply that, you see that farmers are actually very interested in their health. And they're very eager to learn. So I like this, Finola, that you said in your presentation, keep learning. And I was thinking they learn on the farm every day, but also I see when you have outreach activities with farmers, they're very eager to learn and very interested in how they can, because their health is their wealth. They need their health to farm, so they notice anything happening in their bodies. So they are very interested as well to prevent health issues.
Yeah, to be fair, Diana, it's an interesting point you make. If in any population, if it's not accessible, the engagement rate is very, very low. And so,
Yeah,
putting up those barriers is going to create that lower engagement, and particularly around times and locations for farmers when they are quite busy. There's no point in putting on these initiatives, which is a really brilliant point. So
Can I just come in on that? Yeah, I know
yeah,
but it's about taking down those barriers, isn't it?
yeah,
yeah,
To make it, which is what like you're saying, Diane, as well. And like sometimes a farmer, and I see it here, sure, I wouldn't have time to be going in there and sitting in a waiting room for an hour, half an hour, 40 minutes to see a GP or whatever. Like we understand these places, so they say, sure, I leave it. But again, and we've made the point is at the end of the day, the farmer will not neglect his animals because they're his income. And lose a cow, lose a bull, lose a stallion, like that's their income gone.
yeah.
And so we're encouraging farmers to see the value in their own health. And it's not just for them, it's also for their families. And maybe the approach needs more to be around like family health, farm family health, in that get the whole family involved as such. Say,
Yeah.
and sometimes the wife can influence to say, look, you need to go to see the doctor. And I've no doubt that a farmer, if you saw some family member not in great shape, he'd be the first to make sure they got to the doctor. Say, so it's just a
Yeah.
mindset change, basically.
I agree with you, Finola, but it is also about increasing health literacy among farmers,
Yeah.
because from my research, we learned, because people say they're not going to the doctor. And in my research, I had 900 farmers in there. 75% had seen the doctor a year, in the previous 12 months. But that was mainly in reaction because there was a health
mm,
issue that didn't go away. So they had to go, or an injury, or so it was very much in reaction. It is trying to change that mindset to prevention because, for example, a lot of, or like high blood pressure and cholesterol, you don't feel it. You need to check it. So for male farmers from 45 years of age, and female farmers from 50 to 55 after menopause, the risk for heart disease increases. And if you do feel high blood pressure or your cholesterol, you're very late. You're on your way to an acute cardiac event. So it is changing that mindset that even when I do not feel anything, I do need that yearly check-in. I do need that NCT, or like, what you do for your cattle, you do need to do that for yourself as well. And it makes it very difficult. Now, I worked with a lot of vulnerable farmers, single farmers, um, you know, um, who find it also a bit scary to go for a health check, or, so to break that ice, that first contact is very important, and to build up a relationship maybe with your doctor, or these outreach services like the Farmers of Heart, the Irish Heart Foundation is doing, or the IFA now, to just start getting them in that habit of health prevention, and to start normalizing health and raising awareness of what can I do to prevent health issues.
Thanks, Diana. Yeah, the prevention versus the intervention model, of course, it's where we want to move towards. Um, so I would love to stay chatting all day. There's so much information we could take from you, Diana. Maybe we'll have an opportunity again at another later stage. But just, I suppose, to finish that up, if someone was listening and they were saying, yeah, I'm going to make one small change for my well-being, what would your advice be to them to start today?
Well, I thought about this as in, because I want to add to your your 5 steps and all your comprehensive, and I don't think I really can, because all the webinars were very comprehensive. But for me, in relation to physical health, mental health, and safety, I know this connection is extremely important, because social network is important to get the input, to know where you go to help maybe with health literacy. If you want to go to a health check, you can bring someone to talk to someone. But I also learned that it is very important for safety issues. If there's anything broken on the farm, which you cannot repair, because a farmer cannot be an expert in all farming elements, and social network can help with that. And I would also really agree with what I said before. Small steps make a big change. So start small, and if you fall off the bandwagon, then you start again. That's not the end of it. You just try again the next day, and I think that's very important. And one thing I wanted to say in relation to the 5 ways of well-being, it was the activity off farm and keep learning. And in the farmers I worked with, we started with start exercising on the farm. Start taking leave the quad one time a day behind and do that walk. Just start small so you can do it. And we noticed in our study that farmers who started noticing difference, that had a whole positive chain reaction. They started to make more changes and did further other things and went off farm. They went dancing, or, so that is very important. So start small, and if you make the changes, be very proud of yourself and enjoy life as well. Because we say eat healthy, drink moderate, but if you do have a glass of wine or a pint, enjoy that, but keep it moderate. So I would like to say that.
Thank you, Diana. Very sound advice there. And I really agree with that whole ripple effect. If you just work on one small thing, next thing, all of a sudden, a lot of the other pillars are starting to look after themselves as well. Like for instance, if you start eating well, your sleep may be better because you've maybe less caffeine or sugar in your diet.
Yeah.
So you're getting to sleep quicker, etc. And then you're fresher the next day. That's only one example. I suppose there's loads of others, but I do think that ripple effect is really important. Thank you so much, Diana. Finola, have you any final remarks?
Yeah, and I know final, hopefully just final for now, Anne-Marie. There'll be Farewell Tree. And just remind viewers or participants that the Wells Phase 1, and there's some excellent webinars there as well, addressing perhaps more serious issues around gambling, addiction, loneliness, isolation, and what supports are there as well. So just, yeah, look, I think like a good foundation has been the 5 ways to well-being, because the 5 ways to well-being is an evidence-based strategy that was developed by the New Economic Forum in London during the recession of that time, 2000 and whatever, because there was a marked notice that communities were, well, communities were feeling bereft, and families, immigration, unemployment, a lot of things going on. And what they actually did was, and I know you'll be interested in this, Diane, from a research point of view, they actually researched 80 papers before they actually came up with the 5 ways. And And they based it
That's
on the
right.
model that you eat 5 greens a day. I think that could be 8 now. I'm not sure, but definitely 5. And that's really important that it's not just somebody's idea of, oh, 5 ways to well-being. And when you do your deep dive in them at a personal level, and we give you the tools for that and the resources, that and it reflects everything Diane has just said and what you've been saying over the webinars, and Marie. When we connect with ourselves, are we in good shape? Are maybe, in terms of our health, when we're active, when we're learning, when we give to ourselves, and when we're taking notice, we're winning really, at the end of the day. And it's just about, sometimes you might have to be brave in your thinking. Maybe I'm not well, but sure, look, maybe it'll go away. But as you say, Diane, that's the time to make the move. And when if you're at a cattle mart or you're at an agriculture show, and there's an opportunity there and then to have your cholesterol measured, or your heart rate. And I remember my husband came back from one of those shows and he gave me this figure, and I thought, my God, that's terrible. You need to go see a doctor. But I was getting the cholesterol reading mixed up with a heart reading. So I just got that up. But anyway, you know what? He did go to the doctor and he got a clear bill of health at that point in time. So, and he's been going kind of on an annual, so to speak, basis since. So it is about self-care, isn't it, Anne-Marie? And we approach this, and that's why it's so wonderful to have you with us today, Diane, with a kind of a common sense approach. Um, like, what's real, what's acceptable. We have to understand that farmers will have to work long hours. And what we're saying to you, when you work those long hours, try and redress that and reclaim them back, and try
Yeah.
and do your best to get that good night's sleep. So it's just not like, it's a life journey really, isn't it?
It
And
is, and
and
I agree, because if you set unrealistic goals, it will not start. And you want that
no,
start. You want that confidence building with these
yeah,
small. So yeah, I
yeah.
think that's a very good approach.
Yeah, and there's one other thing I feel strong about as well. I don't think society values their farmers good enough, in a sense, and I'm not just talking about Ireland, I'm talking worldwide, because every item of food that's on our table has had some origin where it's organic and natural, coming from a farm setting, whether it's here in Ireland or in South America or Australia, wherever. And we must, only for farmers, we would be very hungry people, I think.
We
Say,
would.
we just need to appreciate them more.
No,
And like the other challenge
actually, the
I also
negative
see,
social perception is a
yeah,
major stressor for farmers.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And they need, we can all identify like with other professional groups and not so professional, depending on this. But when it comes to farming, people just think of them like they're living on a farm and a field and cattle, but there's hours and hours of work goes into that. And I think the perception of farming, like, and I like, any of us that work in an organization we're entitled to a 15-minute tea break. We're entitled to an hour for lunch. If we're lucky, like an afternoon cup of tea. We have health and safety, we have pay rules, we have so much kind of human resources. Where does the farm have that? Say, and that's what we're trying to compensate. And I know Teagasc and just, what do you have to do for yourself? Yeah. So that's my piece there, Anne-Marie, and on that.
Thank
But
you.
I think
Thank you
it
so
comes together.
much.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think we could have this conversation for hours on end. Thank you both for joining me. It's been brilliant to hear your insights and obviously your experience as well in the sector. So just to finish up, just to let people know that you can catch up on all 4 webinars and access all the worksheets and the supporting resources on farmwellhub.ie. We also have other training available for farmers and families as well, and that you can access all that information on the Farmwell Hub. On behalf of the Farmwell Hub and the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, thank you for joining us and being part of this stress management series. Take care, stay safe, and keep well.